As a game studio, you always strive to deliver content which is sticky and make your player base come back to your game again and again. For this, you deliver game experiences which are valuable and enjoyable. That could be a lot of work and a lot of pressure. We understand that. That is exactly why today's talk on Azure PlayFab Experiments will come in handy to ease up that pressure. Azure PlayFab Experiments help you identify the best growth strategy for your game with data-driven confidence and trustworthiness. I'm Shikha, Program Manager with Microsoft. I'm with the Azure PlayFab team since over 3 years and work in the data and analytics domain. Now I'll open the floor for my co-presenters to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name's Lauren. I'm a senior developer on the PlayFab team here at Microsoft. I've been here about a little over 6 years, and I work on data services.
Hi everyone, I'm Ibrahim or Ibs Raga. I'm the VP of Engineering at Nifty Games. I've been here for around 3 years or so, overseeing all things tech, including the development of our two titles and the shared platform beneath. Nice to be with everybody.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Bach. I'm Director of Product at Nifty Games. I look after product responsibilities on our game titles, NBA Clash and NFL Clash, as well as our development platform. And I've been with the company about 2.5 years and in the interactive entertainment space for a long time, focused on mobile games for about the past 7 or 8 years. So happy to be talking to all you guys.
Let's look into today's agenda. We'll start by talking about experimentation as a practice and its key role in the development and live operations of your game. Then we'll talk about PlayFab's experiment service and how you can make use of it. Later, you will hear from our customer partners, Nifty Game Studios, on how they made use of the experimentation service and the success they have garnered from it. This will shed some light on the efficacy of the service through a customer lens. Let's start with experimentation as a practice. As a game studio, you always tend to be player-centric and react to the needs and the desires of everything, desires of the players and everything for continuous engagement, be it through experiences, pricing plan, or community building avenues. It is strategically important to constantly strive for delivering enjoyable and valuable game experiences. So you come up with creative ideas. All those ideas need validation, especially as not all players or segment of players are looking for the same game experiences. Therefore, it is pertinent to leverage experimentation as a tool and as a practice. You get to validate the ideas and develop an understanding of the player behavior and continuously build and deliver sticky content, that too with rapid iterations. As part of an experiment, you compare two or more variants of an application that are shown at random to determine which variation perform better for a given conversion goal. All of that is done in a statistical and mathematically sound foundational manner. Now let's see, what is PlayFab Experiments? Our goal with PlayFab experimentation is to democratize experimentation as a tool and as a practice across gaming. That's why we strive to empower our customer to run multiple concurrent experiments with trustworthiness and make decisions with confidence. There is an emphasis on two words, trustworthiness and confidence. Let's see what we mean by it and how we enable it. During the experiment configuration and running stage, we ensure trustworthiness by bringing in flexible gameplay integration. We achieve this by providing simple and scalable APIs along with intuitive game manager UI, which is basically Azure PlayFab's web portal. You can experiment on different game experience using by configuring either through game code or using overrides. Overrides are nothing but basically modification to the default values, which will be used as variants as part of an experiment. In today's product truth, overrides are only available for the title data service. We also ensure that the experiments are running in a managed manner. For this, we bring in controlled randomization, meaning you get to select the target audience of an experiment along with the percentage of it. Also, while running concurrent experiment, there could be some interaction effects, especially on aspects which are tied together or are in the same game experience realm. So to prevent any skewed result from the interaction effect, we provide exclusion group to run experiments in a mutually concurrent manner. All of these experiment designs can be varied and can cater to the needs of the content makers, developers, marketers, and all the different personas within a game studio. In the analysis phase of the experiment, you can act on the experiment result with confidence. We provide some safety nets like sample ratio mismatch, which is basically a data quality check indicating if there is a difference in the observed and the expected proportion of users as part of an experiment. We provide reliably calculated scorecard result with predefined actionable matrix. All of these matrix are also supplemented with statistically and mathematically sound calculation. There is one particular field called statistical significance indicator, which lets you decide if a metric trend is significant enough for you to make a decision on, especially as during the course of an experiment, the matrix movement can vary. So in such a noisy environment, statistical significant indicator come in handy for you to make decisions and roll out game experiences with confidence. Now I'll pass it on to Lauren to talk about how to use PlayFab experiments.
Thanks, Shika. Next, let's talk about just how easy it is to get started using PlayFab experiments. First, we'll go over how to create experiments with different configurations. Next, we'll talk about how to view and manage all of your experiments. And finally, we'll go over how to analyze the results of your experiments to see how they are performing. So let's start off by talking about just how to create an experiment. In Game Manager, you can navigate down to the Experiments tab and click New Experiment to get started. Here you can see the different options of how to set up your experiment. First, start by selecting a time to schedule your experiment, or you can also choose to run the experiment now. Next, select the audience of your experiment. So this is who you want to participate by either running it on all players in your game or choosing to target specific players through a segment. Next, we have the option of creating mutually exclusive experiments by setting up an exclusion group. This is really important when you have multiple experiments running on similar parts of your game at the same time. When we have mutually exclusive experiments, a player can only be assigned to exactly one experiment so that it doesn't impact the results of others. And finally, the most important part, you can choose to set up your control and treatment variants by adding variables or choosing overrides. If you use variables, you can get the variant ID and variables from the login or treatment assignment API calls. Or if you use overrides, this basically allows you to do config-based experiments. And we currently have the ability to use title data overrides. Next, let's go over how to view and manage your experiments. Here you can see the landing page of experimentation, which shows you an overview of all of your experiments, including which ones are running, drafted, scheduled, and completed. From this page, you can navigate to your scorecards or edit your current experiments. You can also do actions such as starting a drafted or scheduled experiment, stopping running experiments, or cloning a completed experiment in case you would like to redo that. So that was a little bit of managing experiments, and let's now go into how to analyze experiments. So experiments results are shown on the scorecard page, And once you have an experiment running, you'll be able to see your first scorecard after just 12 hours. And from there, you'll get a scorecard every 24 hours for the duration of your experiment. In the scorecard, we provide 4 different types of metrics so you can know how your experiment is performing. These metrics are for all phases of your player life cycle, which includes acquisition, activation, retention, and revenue. So this is a really great overview of how your treatments are doing compared to your control. And that was just a little bit about getting started with PlayFab Experiments. Next, I'm very excited to hand it over to Ibs and Jonathan from Nifty Things to talk about how they use PlayFab Experiments in their game.
Thanks, Lauren. Happy to be here. So, who is Nifty Games? We are a team of industry veterans that are working on quick session, head-to-head sports games on mobile. So as you can see here, we have 2 great partners along with Microsoft and PlayFab. And our first 2 titles are NFL Clash, which is currently worldwide, and NBA Clash, which is in soft launch. For the demo here, we're going to be going in a little bit further on an experiment we ran on NBA Clash. So let's get into it. So why we run A/B tests at Nifty? We'd like to be a very data-informed team, and the A/B testing framework and infrastructure that PlayFab provides us has been a great method to be able to optimize our product. We use it primarily in 2 areas. One of them is when we have a hypothesis around something that's already live and we want to optimize and tweak user behaviors, user flows, and get meaningful information. And secondly, if there's a feature flag or a feature that we want to roll out that we want to get some information on before we roll it out to the entire audience and see how it affects the player's experience. So it's very important that it's a useful tool for us to be able to make meaningful data-informed decisions as a team and as a company. So how does PlayFab Experiment and the experiment service help us? We rely on it for everything it has to offer. So as Lauren went over, creating and selecting the segments, and so defining our player segments based on past behaviors or current status of their profiles, et cetera. How we schedule the start and end times for experiments themselves, deploying the audience thresholds for the different variants, and how we then internalize those results and act on them. The great part about that dashboard is that it gives us the high-level overview on the default scorecard, but at the same time is extremely customizable. And what we've done is utilizing the API, we are able to augment with our own analytics solution as well, as we've started to outgrow some of the features, and our internal business intelligence team has taken on new functionality. So we lean on the account and the variant membership IDs to help us augment the systems. So PlayFab itself, very central to the Nifty Games tech stack. What we have here is an infographic showing kind of all aspects of our infrastructure for our mobile games. And clearly in the middle there is PlayFab. So what we did is we tried to leave the hard stuff to the experts. We lean in on everything that PlayFab has to offer, and then over time we can augment with various third-party solutions or in-house solutions. So we call out here our custom analytics solution, but then other services as well, but really relying on the user authentication, the segmentation, the experimentation that PlayFab offers to be able to run and operate multiple live titles at the same time. And yeah, now throwing it over to Jonathan to walk us through a use case from NBA Clash.
So here's an example of an experiment that we ran in our NBA Clash title, which is currently in soft launch. When we ran this experiment, we were early on in our soft launch life, live, I think, in several different geographies, I think namely Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines. We were out of our technical stability phase and starting to focus on early retention. So early retention, I mean like D1 through day 7 or day 1 through day 7. So player installs the game. If they come back the following day, they would have retained on D1. If they come back 7 days later, they would have retained on D7, day 7. And obviously, we're trying to have as many of the installs come back early on in the experience as possible. So we had done our own analysis, and we had realized that the retention curve of payers, this is people who had bought an item in our game, for real dollars, IAP package in that purchase, their retention drastically outperformed the retention of non-payers, which makes total sense and is the behavior you would expect. It was severe, probably 3 to 4 times a higher retention curve. At the time, we had an offer in the store for all new installs called the starter pack, which is a very common offer you'd show and give to players in mobile games. And that offer, that starter pack was, cheap price point, 99 cents, got a lot of good stuff for it, help a new player along. And we had a timer on it where that starter pack was available for 72 hours. We had a hypothesis that if we could get more players to purchase that starter pack earlier, like on day one, they would psychologically be more invested in the game and retain better within that first 7 days. At the time, we were seeing a big drop off around D3, D4. And so we thought that by converting more players earlier on in their gameplay experience, we would be able to capture a certain part of that that audience and get them to exhibit retention behavior that was more in line with what our payers were, thus lifting our entire early D7 curve. So we decided to run an A/B test, a multivariate experiment, a very simple one. And what you see here on the right is what we ran. We basically offered that starter pack, same price point, 99 cents. But if you can see on the left, we ran a test variant that had a 24-hour timer. So you only had 24 hours to capture that deal versus the control group, which had the current experience, which was on a 72-hour timer. And we hashed the audience 50-50 and let it run. So in looking at the results, we were looking at two things. Obviously, we were looking at retention, as we mentioned, which is the overall goal of the experiment, but we were also looking at conversion. Conversion, again, being how many people actually bought this 99-cent starter pack, purchased an IAP. So on the left here, you'll see the PlayFab results. This is what the PlayFab default experiment readout matrix looks like. And you can see what I've highlighted here in green is that we did actually see an increase in conversion over the test variant. So the people who only had 24 hours to make that purchase did actually purchase more. But if you look at the data, it's an increase, but it wasn't a big enough increase to give us a confidence interval that we were looking for. PlayFab defaults to a 95% confidence interval, meaning that you can be 95% sure that at scale, as this audience grows, that scaled audience will exhibit the same behavior. And the results that the PlayFab portal showed us were inconclusive. We did not have enough of a variance between the control and the test variant to give us that 95% confident ratio. So we did our own math, which is the information you'll see here on the right, and we lowered that confidence ratio to 90%. And when we did so, you can see at the top here in green that we did actually reach statistical significance at a 90% confidence ratio. So you can see that the control group at scale would fall within a range of 0.21 to 0.55% conversion, where the test variant would fall within a range of 0.57 all the way up to 1.12% conversion. So definitely positive results. These conversion numbers might look a little low to people who are familiar with the mobile game ecosystem in general, but reminder that this was early on in our soft launch and we were in what are considered to be typically low monetizing territories, namely, again, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Vietnam. What about retention? So here at the top is the retention results as they are displayed in the PlayFab Experiment Manager. We're looking at the top row there is your D1 retention, and the bottom information is the bottom section of the top is your D7 retention. And what you can see is that we do see a slight increase in these retention numbers between the variant and the control group, but very, very marginally. it's really like 15.728 against 15.720 in day 1, and 4.3 to 4.6 in day 7. So yes, there's a little bit of a performance lift, but it's basically noise. And again, as you would expect, PlayFab showed that this was not statistically significant. Again, at the 95% confidence interval that they default to. So we dug a little deeper and did a custom analysis. And what you'll see on the bottom is that when we cohorted the groups separately and only looked at payers, so now we're not looking at the retention curve of the entire population, but we're just looking at the retention curve of the payers. And again, we lowered our confidence interval. We didn't hit statistical significance at 95%. We didn't hit it at 90%, and we checked at 85%. And what you're seeing here in the table at the bottom is the data that returns statistical significance at an 85% confidence level, showing that the variant, while we're seeing a D1 of 68%, which underperforms the control group's D1 of 75%, as you start to get further down the retention curve, D3, D7, D14, D21, we saw that the test variant for the retention curve of payers drastically outperformed the control group. You can see by D21, we're looking at 21% versus 16%. At D7, we were 52% against 33%. So these are meaningful lifts. And while it's not a 95% confidence interval, 85% made us feel pretty good about where we were in the soft launch period. So we actually feel like this was a reasonable, successful experiment, and our hypothesis held true, and we did actually were able to increase day 7 retention of our payer cohort through this test. So what were the takeaways here? Well, on the highest order analysis, the first order analysis, our top tier data, basically we realized that this actually worked when we tightened the constraints and tried to pull payer conversion forward by fear of missing out on an offer with a shorter X-ray window. It worked. We succeeded in driving a higher conversion with the test variant, and we succeeded in driving higher payer conversion. That's kind of top level thinking and top level analysis. Typically on the product side, we try to continue that analysis with deeper order questions. So at a first glance, you'd say this was a successful experiment, and at a second glance, you'd have some follow-up questions that we are continuing to look into. What about longer term revenue? How does these cohorts look, at 1 month, 2 months, and what does this do for LTV? Does this experiment hold in other geographies that we move into as we continue along our soft launch, more of our tier 1 geographies? Does this experiment data still hold? That's probably a follow-up experiment you'd want to run. Additionally, can you optimize this even further? This, as you saw in the UI UX from the game screens, that marketing of the time you had to make that purchase is very small. What would happen if we gave the users a push notification, if we put a home banner in the screen, ways to draw attention to it more? Would that actually yield more substantial results in terms of conversion and retention? These are all things we'd want to look at as a second order analysis and as subsequent steps to this experiment. So yeah, as a takeaway, A/B testing is critical. It is, as a data-driven studio, it is really critical and key to us being able to optimize the player experience to generate the best game experience we can for our players, make sure that we are making changes that result in more engaging experience for them. And also, we find it pretty critical in running a business as being able to optimize and make changes to the game as a product that we need to hit our core business objectives and core KPIs. And without being able to A/B test these experiences, it'd be really difficult to do that and be relying on a lot more guesswork. There's a lot of different tools out there in the marketplace to do this. We, have been working with PlayFab for a long time, and for our needs, they've been a really great partner. They allow us to take a lot of the technical lifting out of the experiment deployment, the experiment management, in general, the way that you need to set up, design, manage, deploy, and analyze these experiments. PlayFab has been a valuable tool for us. We talk to them a lot about their roadmap and about things they have coming. The tool continues to evolve, it continues to improve. And for a studio like us, it's been they've been really good partners, and they have driven a lot of efficiencies across our development cycle that we wouldn't have been able to do without them.
Thank you. So as we wrap this up, I hope now you understand how you can make use of Azure PlayFab Experiments to identify the best growth strategy for your game with data-driven confidence and trustworthiness. Up here, you can see some resources for you to get started, starting from technical resources along with API documentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach to us on our forum at aka.ms/playfabforums. Go get started with your experimentation practice and test your hypothesis to maximize player engagement.